Ink limits are increasing, a brand new Rectober event, and Rec Room is taking action on low-effort rooms. Hello everybody, I'm BillehBawb from BVR, and welcome back to Rec Room Roundup, where we go over the latest in Rec Room news and updates. We've got a lot to go over today, but first, let's talk about the latest game update. First up, you might remember last update how they accidentally shadow dropped the new room progression system. Well, in this update, they've officially had it, and also fixed some bugs that it had. Along with that, we got the room level HUD system, which allows you to show the level that a player is in a room above their head instead of their Rec Room level. I already talked about progression in the last video, so not going to go into it too much here, but if you're a creator, you should definitely try messing around with this. There are also a bunch of new circuits added to Circuits V2, most of which relate to some more advanced vector stuff, so that's going to be useful to some creators. They also added a whole bunch of new sound effects to the sound effects chip relating to melee combat, like sword swings and stuff. Guys, look at this crazy new sound effect they just added.
Remember to use code BVRR.
That's insane. I cannot believe they added that. This could indicate that soon they're planning on supporting melee combat with Circuits V2 better. Currently, most Circuits V2 combat stuff is just for projectile weapons. They did add a melee hit event a bit ago, but there's still some more support that's needed for good melee combat. Like, for example, soon we're probably getting the swing handle that was used in Make It to Midnight to make Bonky's hammer, and it basically detects, like, when you swing something, so obviously that'll be useful for swords and stuff. But yeah, right now it's just sound effects, but if you're planning on making a melee combat game, there's definitely some good stuff coming. Rec Room Studio will also now render Maker Pen shapes correctly. Before, if you opened a room in Rec Room Studio, they'd be rendered as the old beveled style of shapes, so it wouldn't actually really look like the room and all the shapes would be messed up and stuff. So you couldn't really export any of your Maker Pen stuff as a 3D model without it looking really weird. But now that the shapes are fixed, this allows creators to be able to export their Maker Pen creations as actual 3D models and use them in Blender or whatever. This could be super useful for creators who want to like build stuff in Rec Room but then export it and animate it in Blender, or creators who want to make like prototypes of stuff in Rec Room just because they like building in VR, and then they can export it into Blender and use that as a base for their actual model. There's a lot of possibilities with being able to export Maker Pen shapes, so it's really good this was finally changed. And lastly, this might be the biggest change of the entire update. They finally fixed the mirror warping on walk mode in VR. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then great, keep it that way. But if you know, you know. And that's it for the main game update, but there have been some changes coming to the game outside of regular updates, so let's talk about those. The first big one is that ink limits were actually increased by quite a bit. You might have heard me talk last episode about how they said eventually there will be no more ink limits at all. Or you might have heard about the limits V2 option that some people have that gives you like 1,000 times more ink in your room. Well, this change that happened is different from both of those things. This is just a global increase to the amount of ink in every normal room. Any room that was previously at 100% ink is now down to 75% ink, which is a pretty significant increase. This change is probably just a precursor to them raising the limit more and more before eventually they just get rid of it like they said they would. I'm guessing that this is just them like testing the waters with it and testing performance on a much larger scale than Limits V2 let them do. The next change that happened is a split test that some players are seeing that Rec Room has changed the UI for their chat. Right now, if I type something in chat, you'll see how it looks normally. It comes out over here in like a big bubble with the text in it. You know, this is kind of mostly how it's always looked. But some players are now starting to see a new chat UI that looks like this. And you might have noticed, it literally is exactly like Roblox's chat UI. It's the same bubble, it's the same positioning with it being right over their head, and I'm pretty sure it's also literally the same font. Now, credit where it's due, the old speech bubbles were pretty massive, sometimes kind of hard to read, and also they could only display one thing at once. Whereas this new chat UI is more compact, and you can see subsequent messages. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of Rec Room removing more of this game's personality and just replacing it with Roblox yet again. Like, we can't even go a single Rec Room Roundup episode without Rec Room doing something that I have to compare to Roblox. Let me know what you think of this new UI in the comments. Does it also bother you, or am I crazy? Next up's one of the new events that they announced at RecCon, that being Rectober. They just be putting rec in front of everything these days, I guess. Now, when they announced this, I was kind of hoping it'd be an actual event that people could, like, do stuff in, but it turns out it's pretty much just a way for them to release some new Halloween cosmetics. If you go into the rec center, there's a big portal right now that takes you into a different Halloween version of the rec center. And if you go in there, there's a storefront with a whole bunch of Halloween items. And then also for this event, they've re-released the Haunt Society haunted house thing they did last year. I don't know why they just re-released it. I guess they couldn't be bothered to make a new one. It seems like so far, this is pretty much all Rectober's gonna be, but if anything changes over the next few weeks, I'll make sure to let you know. And finally, maybe the biggest change of the entire week, Rec Room has added some extra policies for creators when it comes to making their room thumbnails. You might have noticed recently on the new tab, this epidemic of creators just like ripping room thumbnails straight from Roblox, or just like putting popular stuff like Huggy Wuggy or whatever in there. Like, I don't know. I don't need to explain it. You're seeing it right now. I'm sure you've seen it in game. Well, surprisingly recently, after multiple months of just letting this go unchecked, Rec Room has taken direct action against this type of thumbnail. I'll leave a link in the description if you want want to read the announcement for yourself, but it essentially boils down to 3 things. One being that if your room thumbnail is just straight up taken from somewhere else, it isn't allowed. If your room thumbnail isn't representative of the actual content of the room, it isn't allowed. Or if your room thumbnail contains IP that you don't have permission to use, it now also isn't allowed. I'm sure that you can tell, but the effects of these 3 changes are pretty huge. This not only directly disallows those Roblox thumbnails we were talking about earlier, but also pretty much any room that includes or is based on something with pre-existing copyright, which a lot of Rec Room games are. The rule does say that rooms that are just like fan content are allowed, so we don't really know yet what this is going to mean for rooms that have like Five Nights at Freddy's or Poppy Playtime characters in the thumbnails and stuff like that. But it just seems like creators making rooms based on pre-existing IP are going to have to be a lot more careful about their thumbnails now. Regardless of the wider effect that this has on rooms that we might not totally know about yet, I think it is good that they're directly taking action on these like low effort garbage Roblox thumbnails. And it's just good to see Rec Room taking direct action on low effort content on the platform, because honestly, I never thought they would. Let's hope this ends up being a good change, and I'll make sure to keep you all updated with any of the actual effects that it might have. Here is this week's weekly rotation of items. That's about it for the news this week. If you want to see me coach Slat to be a professional circuiteer, then check out this video, but otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.